Okay, right. We're just waiting for a few more people to join us on the call. Everybody is muted as we enter into this room, just so that we can make sure that we kick off in the best possible way. Ramsay is leading the seminar, the web session today, and I'm joining and facilitating him as well. Ramsay, would you like to just introduce yourself just quickly?
Thank you so much, Alistair. Hi, everyone, and great to see everyone on the call. My name's Ramsay Melhuish. I head up the Education and Professional Development team at Pickatale, and will be supporting you on your Pickatale journey. I've been a teacher over 25 years and in EdTech for the last 15, and delighted to be on this webinar. So thanks, Alistair. And maybe introduce yourself for those who don't know.
Thank you. So Ramsay joins us from England, from down in the south coast of England. And I'm Alistair. I've been involved in helping educators use technology to reinforce teaching practice and to explore ways and means to get the most and maximize learning opportunities for children for the last 20 odd years. And I've had the pleasure of doing that all over the world. Currently, I'm meeting you all and greeting you all from Bologna in Italy, where I'm just about after this session heading off to the Bologna Book Fair for the day. So it's great to have you all with us, and we'll get started.
So thank you, everyone, and looking forward to having your feedback from the Bologna Book Fair. It's the most amazing children's book fair, and we're looking to see what we can then add to our library. So just a quick few house rules just to begin with. I have muted most people's microphones, but if you haven't already, if you could place that on mute, that would be fantastic. If you are able to turn on your camera, that would be great. No worries if not. We've got the chat feature for conversations, so please post anything in there, keep it relevant to the topic. And occasionally people do experience technical issues, in which case just try refreshing your browser or the app, or sometimes people find it's easier just to leave and rejoin the meeting, which leads us to the last point, which is this webinar is being recorded, and we can then share the recording afterwards. But like I said, thank you so much for taking the time on the afternoon. Alistair.
Yeah, thank you.
I wanted to just check if you're sharing your screen right now, because I don't think we're seeing it.
Thank you so much, Alistair. I should be giving me 2 seconds again. And are you seeing it now?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Ramsay, you've muted yourself, or it's muted you.
It has muted me. I'm so grateful. Thank you, Alistair. So in our session today, we're going to have a look at literacy statistics, both UK and global. We have schools all over the world as well as in the UK. We're going to look at how you nurture reluctant to confident readers. And we all know from our classrooms that that's the case. We're going to introduce some intervention strategies. We're going to talk about creating a love of reading culture. Then we're going to go into some AI. So we've got Pickatale Create, so harnessing AI for reading. And then finally, we're going to get some interactive elements to it. So we're wanting to hear some of your thoughts regarding this in terms of identifying and engaging struggling readers. And we're going to leave you with a few takeaways for that. And then Q&A I placed at the end, but please use the chat at any point, because you'll be able to place in a question regarding a key area. And like I said, this meeting is being recorded and will be shared with you afterwards to share with your colleagues, should that be the case. So diving in, what is the current state of literacy in the UK and worldwide? Now, I'm going to start off just with the UK. And there's been quite a few studies and surveys done just in the last 6 to 12 months that have really highlighted some key issues. For example, the Literacy Trust, they found that 1/3, slightly over 34.6% of children aged 8 to 18 reported enjoying reading in their free time in 2024. This is the lowest level since surveys began in 2005, almost a 10% drop from the previous year alone. So we're aware that this is a sliding decline. Then the Book Trust found that while 33% of 7-year-olds say they love reading, this starts to drop remarkably. So by the age of 10, it's down to 29%. And then by 11, which is a 25% drop, down to 25%. Now, the TESS, the Times Educational Supplement, published an article about school readiness recently, and they came out that less than half of parents think children should know how to use books correctly before starting primary school. And this is before they even got into mainstream. And then the Literacy Trust, 1 in 12 children in 2023 in the UK say they didn't have a book of their own at home. And that was even more stark for 5 to 8-year-olds, where 1 in 5 don't have a book of their own. So it really brings to the paramount the idea that we do need to find different ways to present reading to children across the world, and particularly in this case, the UK. So I'll just move over to the next slide and let Alistair talk through this.
So whilst Ramsay is based in the UK, my focus is much more around literacy around the globe. And this is really interesting. Just very quickly to rattle through these. As you can see here, between 2018 and 2022, the average performance in reading across countries that took part in OECD research fell by 10 points, which was twice as much as previously recorded. Further to that, 2/3 of the 81 countries that took part in the 2022 rankings were under the international reading average score. Further to that, PISA has stated that students whose teachers were available when schools were closed were more confident about self-directed learning. That's what the research suggests. Most were confident about using digital learning platforms and finding learning resources, but only 60% were confident about motivating themselves to do schoolwork. Then students who spent up to 1 hour per day on a device for learning activities in school have actually been scoring higher than students who spent no time doing so. People that ban cell phones in class, it's proven that it may help reduce distractions, but actually does hinder the use or the ability of students to self-regulate their use of devices themselves.
Thanks, Alistair. And so this really highlights the requirement for us to perhaps up the game in terms of trying to really provide a structure in terms of literacy, both regarding physical books as well as digital books for this generation coming through. We know there's unique challenges there. So just moving on to the next slide, how can we, and I'm talking in terms of Pickatale and you as teachers, take students from their very emergent state, they're learning to read, to being able to come into secondary school, high school, being able to read, to learn. Now, we've worked hard at Pickatale. We want to identify those in the middle of the wheel, those learning to read, with the right tools to be able to access language as they go through school. So the science of reading really highlights the importance of phonics, and we've got a phonics program coming soon. We've got comprehension quizzes over on 2,500 books. We're going to be introducing a fluency assessment that will have a baseline and then regular check-ins. We've got the Oxford Dictionary being implemented currently. That will allow them to really expand their vocabulary. And then we're looking carefully, and today particularly, about how to align to curriculum, give to children opportunities to have choice, and particularly different text types. And then there's reading for pleasure, the idea of reading culture. And then we're going to touch on AI tools and really how we support teachers with that. And in essence, this is a Pickatale reading ecosystem. We're really working hard to take that child from learning to read in the center to read to learn by the time they move on. So when you go into the Pickatale library, we have 8 distinct reading stages. As you can see on each of the book covers, that stage is clearly indicated, stage 6, stage 0, stage 4, etc. And that allows a child between the ages of 4 and 12, and I'm thinking native, this is UK children, to be able to really progress through with their language learning. Now, when I move on to the next slide, we try and align with the CEFR. So that's taking children at stage 0, so that's pre-A1 and A1. And then I've got native reading ages 3 to 5, non-native 3 to 6. And again, you use your teacher judgment regarding where your students are. And then you progress through the stages all the way up to the stage 6+. That can really extend, as I say, students 12 plus, depending on their ability. So what strategies are there to support these struggling readers and encourage this love of reading? And we often, as adults, expect children to have the love of reading. We're perhaps avid readers ourselves, but actually this takes a bit of nurturing. So I'm going to focus just on what Pickatale offers in this case, and I'm going to dive away from the slideshow just to show you some of the examples that might help that reluctant reader. So, for example, there's animated books within Pickatale. Now, these are fantastic. They've got moving images. I've just come straight into search within the Pickatale platform. And then in categories, I've just highlighted animated. And you can see we've got 47 different books. In this case, perhaps I'll click on the blue whale, a whale of a mammal. And this can prove a great stepping stone for a child who doesn't want to necessarily read static text, but is looking for something with a little bit more dynamicism. So I'm just going to resize my browser. I'm going to place in, and we're just going to have a quick look through it. So as you can see, it's very subtle animation to it. We've got blue whales are bigger, they're long, they weigh an awful lot. You can see the text is appropriate for that beginner reader. Blue whales are big too, the baby ones. They eat lots. Their favorite food is krill. They eat a lot of krill. Sometimes they eat so much because their tummies are full. Nice fact, they don't have teeth, so they don't need to brush their teeth. They don't chew, they just swallow. They live in the ocean, and they have great hearing. So in other words, we're introducing the topic, a science topic, and then getting them through. And they again get rewards as they come through that, which leads me nicely to the next point. So for example, we've introduced avatars recently. So every time a child reads a book, they then get pip points, pip coins, and they can then apply that to their character. They can change everything from eyes, hats, glasses, tops, their trousers, their shoes. And then as they read more and more, they can get a little cacophony of different pets. So again, it's just trying to incentivize them. They get a pip point for reading a book and a pip point for then doing the comprehension quiz. But ultimately, we want students to have a say. They need to have agency. They need to feel like they're owning their reading journey. So every time they read a book, before getting that pip point, they get a chance just to give some feedback. So in this case, for example, I've come to the student Grant. I can see he's given feedback. That's a thumbs up, thumbs down. And then as a teacher, I get the book review or the comments fed through to the teacher dashboard. And equally, he can say he didn't enjoy a book so much, but give a reason for it. So again, giving students that choice, really, really important. We do have as well downloadable materials, and these are accessed on the website. Again, these will all be links that are shared with you. And I can just come to guides and support. We've got recommended books, and then we've got different reading resources. And again, illustrating book covers can be good for a reluctant reader. Or indeed, introduce a series of certificates or challenges within your class. And I think Alistair might talk about more of that later. And then there's this category. It's my favorite category probably in Pickatale, and it's called Pick a Stage. And we've got hundreds of books within it. Now, where these are clever, and again, I think back to my time in the classroom, is I would have readers of very different abilities, but I want them all able to access the same text at the level that's appropriate for them. So in this case, I've got 3 versions of the book, How It's Made from Sea to Salt. I've got a stage 3, a stage 5, and a stage 6+. And we can all read the same storyline. But the main difference is in the language in it. You're going to be obviously teaching English. We're going to look at the vocabulary and the grammar side of it. So for example, the stage 3 book's got very short, direct sentences, familiar vocabulary. As I start to go to stage 5, we're changing the sentence structure. We're introducing more sophisticated tier 2 vocabulary. And then by the time we get up to stage 6+, we're introducing what we call figurative language, savory crunch. We're getting more into the detail of it. And then sentences with, for example, subordinate clauses and more broader, more precise vocabulary. So these can be great for engaging groups of children in the same topic, but at the level that's suitable for them. So differentiated readers. Al, I think you had an opportunity, you were going to talk through how to create love of reading culture. And again, I remember back to my classroom and the reading corner I had, but maybe you've got some ideas too.
Yes, thank you, Ramsay. So I've spent a lot of time in schools trying to get children to be immersed in reading activities. And sometimes it's really difficult and challenging when you just have a traditional library where you might have an opportunity to get the children into the library for a half-hour slot. And inevitably, what will happen is the children will run around, find some books, sit down, perhaps thumb through a few pages, put the back on the shelf because it was not what they thought it was going to be. And a lot of time it does get spent sort of finding those sorts of books. But if you can have an opportunity for children to engage with books in that way, it still does mean that they're immersed in an opportunity to actually see what is available in the library and what you can do and find out. So library time does definitely have a place. One of the things that works for me is having open time reading and inviting parents into school sometimes to enable parents to read alongside children in the classroom at dedicated times, so that parents can spend more time listening to children read and perhaps take some notes as to what the children have been reading too. Certainly, rewarding children with their reading activities is a great way of motivating children with their reading. And that can be done with stickers or certificates and rewards. And I know so many people do that, but it's just worth reflecting on that as an opportunity to celebrate. And it's sometimes quite often that we forget to, reward for those kinds of things. Good behavior in the classroom is a great thing to get rewarded. Outstanding sports performance, etc., is always a great thing to get rewarded. But celebrating reading achievements with certificates and recognizing that as a whole school activity is really, really valuable to get children talking about amongst themselves and reflecting on their reading progress. Gamification is obviously something that Ramsay's been talking about, which is rather good fun. But you can actually make some gamification for yourselves if you've got a spare wall in the classroom or in the canteen or in a corridor where children congregate. Why not use your reading platform like Pickatale to get some information about what the books are that children are reading, how long they've been reading for, how many books they've been reading for, and make a cool wall of reading fun for children to see how well they're performing as readers in the class, in the year, it may be in the whole school, and make some fun challenges so that children can see on that wall maybe a poster of how many books have been read and where, and they know where they've been achieving on that. I've walked into schools time and time again to actually see children standing in front of a wall that they would normally be just walking idly past, and actually stopping, looking, pointing, and talking about whoever has got up to the top 3 readers of the week, for example. So it's a really great way to use some wall space and actually have a way to engage children as they're moving around the school as well. There's other really fantastic things that we've seen using Pickatale. In fact, perhaps we organise a month-long reading campaign, or have whole school book days where the children are encouraged to be creative around the books that they've been reading. And the way that you could do that is encourage children to perhaps perform a scene from a book, or perform the story on a stage or in a performance shared with the class, or perhaps celebrate the book or books that they've been reading through the use of art with 3D animation if you've got the tools, or with so stop-go animation, for example, or with modeling or just with artwork as well. You know, books are not just about the words on the page. There is much about the illustrations that accompany them as well, and to give children an opportunity to realize their potential as illustrators just as much as it is important to be readers, which is what the focus of our session today is all about, is really important. I firmly believe that.
Thank you, Alistair. That's fantastic. Some really, really good tips there. And again, looking at more the holistic view of reading and just creating that overall culture. So I'm just going to slip on to the next slide, and we're going to come to Pickatale Create. Now, this is one of our most popular tools in that it really allows you to target a particular class or a student or group of students with a book that you've created on any topic of your choice. Now, this is personalized cross-curricular learning through stories. Most of you will be familiar with CLIL, so that's content and language integrated into learning. And this is an incredible tool to be able to help facilitate that. So what I'm going to do is just talk you through how I've been presenting Pickatale Create at recent events and with the recent school training sessions. So immediately I challenge the teachers to think about, what is the purpose for creating this book? Is it just for a student or their whole class? What age and reading level are the students in your class? That's the first thing to think about. What subject and learning objective are we going to include in this story? So just to give you a flavor of the types of books that we've been looking at, I'm going to focus just perhaps on the topic of geography to begin with. And on the left-hand side, you can see the learning objective that I've got in my teacher planning, my schemes of work, about weathers and systems, understanding how weather patterns change in different parts of the world. Now, I can just place that learning objective into Create, but if I want to personalize it, I might come up with a simple prompt. For example, a student named Jay learns that about weather patterns across different continents while fixing a broken weather machine. So in other words, I've given it a little bit of context. Or it might be about map work schools. And I did this in a workshop with 11-year-old children, where they had to create books about planning a rescue operation for a local flood disaster. They then created a book that was relevant to their locality and their community. It might be that we're looking at well-being, otherwise known as citizenship. So it might be about relationships, students that are managing conflict and understanding kindness and empathy. So potentially a prompt could be exploring a magical world where each land represents a different emotion and learns how to manage his feelings as he goes through each land. And then I've put an extra little prompt at the end saying the message of the story should be featured on the last page, again, to reiterate what that story is really teaching. We've then got citizenship and community, about understanding the rights and responsibilities of being a citizen in the world today, fairness, justice, and equality. I've even challenged myself with mathematics, numeracy, as it's known in the UK. So whether it's a story about describing shapes by their properties at home, and a child goes round and discovers the shapes they've been learning in school, but within the home setting and within the home environment. Or indeed trying to link in factors, multiples, and prime numbers for an older child, and again, link that into a narrative story. And Create can do this really, really effectively. But for today's example, I wanted just to focus on science. So we've got two options. I'm thinking probably I'm going to go food choices with this one. So being able to identify foods that could be eaten in moderation and understand how these choices affect our health. So like I said, I could, if I was wanting to save time, just copy and paste that learning objective, and it will produce a general book regarding that particular area of learning. Now, if I was to make it a little bit more personal, though, I'm going to add in some extra detail. So forgive me, Alistair, I've used you as the character in this particular story. But in this case, Alistair's visiting the supermarket with his parents. He's been learning about informed food choices. He doesn't want foods that are high in sugar or salt or ultra-processed. And he wants to learn about tips for choosing healthier alternatives. Now, again, I've added in some extra little detail. So I want 4 sentences per page. It's for a younger learner. And I also want to try and link in to my English language lesson. So I've got some tier 1 words here. Again, improve, many, prove, and because. and I'm going to integrate them into the story so they get that exposure to them through repetition. So let's see what we can create. I'm going to dive over into Pickatale. I'm going to open up onto the Pickatale Create page and just let it load up a second. And what I'm going to do is just paste in the prompt that I've just read out. Okay, so you can see the little additional detail that I've added in. I'm going to go to next step, and then I'm going to think about what illustration style Alistair will resonate with. So it can be anything from realistic, cinema, natural, through to more comic cartoons, through to manga, through to different styles that suit particular learners. But in this case, I think with this one, I'm going to go for a nice watercolor. I can then choose the audio for a book. And this, again, a key resource for reluctant readers, get them to listen to stories as well as read them. And I can have everything from the more trailer style, American style voice for the Hollywood films.
With Pickatale's book creator.
Or indeed, a nice Irish accent.
Pickatale's book creator.
But perhaps I'll choose Alice in this.
With Pickatale's book creator.
Now, while I've been choosing the illustrations and the narrator, the book has started to be created. So you can see how quick this is. It's immediately come in with a title. I can edit this. I can place in keywords as I want. In other words, I can personalize and have full control over every aspect of the book. And in this case, I've got Alistair went to the supermarket with his parents. He wanted to choose foods that are good on it. And he started looking at the labels. And then you can see this asterisk word because that's the word I've been learning with my English. So I'm again trying to integrate it in. I can scroll through each of the pages. I can regenerate images if I want. And like I said, I can control exactly what's in the text. I can personalize it as much as I want. In this case, though, I'm going to keep this short and sweet. I'm going to generate the book. It's now a live book in your library, ready to be assigned to your students. So I can just select my class. I can select the date that they're going to read it from. I'll give them 2 weeks. I'm going to select all students, or indeed I could just select one or a small cohort. Equally, I can assign it to other, share it with other teachers. So again, I can save ourselves time and share really good practice in terms of the books. But perhaps most importantly, in thinking of CLIL, I can then translate it into multiple different languages. In this case, I'm going to translate it into Spanish. So I've got a bilingual version of the book. I can go through, edit it again if I want, regenerate. But in this case, I've now got 2 versions of the same book, one in English and then one in Spanish. Now, what we'll do is just quickly read it through. You'll get a flavor of how it's been created. I created it in a matter of minutes. But this way, as I say, I can use it at the whole class at the front of the classroom, or indeed I can get the children to read it when they're at home.
Alistair's smart supermarket choices. Alistair went to the supermarket with his parents. He wanted to choose foods that were good for him. He looked at the labels on the boxes and cans. Foods.
Okay, I'll pause that there. We'll just scroll through the book. You get the idea about it. He's learning about informed food choices through a narrative regarding him as the main character. And that way it could really encourage that reluctant reader to get involved in various different topics. Now, I mentioned user feedback, so I can give it a thumbs up. I can then perhaps go for something that I want to review with it, and whether it's the 2 stars and a wish, 2 things I liked about the book, 2 things I would like to change about it, or indeed a commentary on the book, that then all gets fed through to the teacher, and then I get my pit point. So hopefully that's given you all a little bit of an insight into how you can use Pickatale Create to really target particular learners and perhaps reluctant or resistant readers with content that will resonate with them. So this is the point in this today's webinar where we would love to hear from you. So we've got the chat feature. What I would like to know, and you've been spending lots of time in the classroom with children learning English, different levels, is how do you identify and then engage those reluctant readers in your class? Now, I used to teach a class of 35 children. I would say that perhaps a good 60 or 70% were comfortable with reading. But I needed to, as the teacher, identify and support those that were struggling a little bit with it. And whether it's through perhaps them being resistant to perhaps writing or talking about guided reading sessions. So in other words, having informed choices. Thank you there from Christian from Bangkok. But have any of you got any tips that you can share with anyone else on the webinar and share with us regarding identifying these children from your class who perhaps are less keen on the reading? And no trouble if not. I know Alistair's got a few ideas and I've got a few takeaways that might be valuable for you to place into your classroom.
Must remember to unmute myself in these things. Thank you. Yeah, yes. There's a great researcher from the UK. It's actually probably worth noting some of the things that Dylan William has been doing in the classroom, which is a good way of getting children to be questioning or to be able to question children in the class, in order to have effective questioning to lead to understanding and where children are at with their learning. And that does apply to reading as well. But it's all about, finding the right questions to ask to really make sure that on the spot, in the moment, whilst you're doing some collective reading or individual reading, as to how you're identifying the students that may not necessarily have understood what it is that they've been reading in the text. And it does take some time to plan those questions. I think some of the techniques that can be employed are rather clever as well. Dylan William is an advocate of the pose, pause, pounce and bounce method, which gets children to encourage deeper thinking and engagement in questioning. More can be found about the pose, pause, pounce and bounce method online, I'm sure. But even just a way of questioning children at random in the class, it can cause some anxiety of children. But if children become more familiar with, perhaps taking a straw to answer questions, it makes it easier to choose the child in the class in order to ask the questions as well. But it takes a lot of planning to do that, granted.
Yeah. No, that's really valid. And we used to have a talking stick that used to go around the class and allow children to do that. So it's a lovely suggestion. And a really good suggestion from Elmer. Thank you for contributing. Who was saying that someone who does not cooperate in the class, perhaps choral reading and reading together with their peers, can again get them confident. They don't feel that sense of spotlight on them and that feeling of being the center of focus. And what leads nicely, because as I say, the Dylan William piece is really, really valid in terms of the types of questioning. And actually, just before I move on to it, I've just noticed Eliza has come in with, we've got reading behaviors, avoiding tasks. Absolutely. I think that's really valid. Skimming without comprehension. That's really, really good. Apologies, I'm just repeating it down here. Disengaging quickly. Connecting reading materials to their interests, fantastic. And that's again where we really resonate with that. And that's where Create hopefully will be a really good tool for you. I love that, Eliza. Thank you so much. And then we've got observe children who avoid books, show limited interest in storytelling, or struggle with attention during reading activities. Incorporate interactive storytelling, sensory-rich books, playful activities. And again, going into that more holistic thing, puppetry, etc. And then offering reinforcement and build confidence and motivation. So that's thank you, Gladys, and thank you, Karen. Really, really lovely suggestions. So all ones that we can help take away. And I thought just again on that questioning side, the idea of perhaps creating a pick a talk space, able to feel comfortable talking about your books and perhaps identifying particular students who you do want to see. Have they skimmed over it? Have they really understood it? So just checking with comprehension what happened in the story, describing perhaps the main events that might have happened, non-fiction or fiction. And then more with the fiction books, character exploration. Who is your favorite character and why? What made them interesting to you? And again, each child will have a different viewpoint on that. Vocabulary obviously is a great one to find in. Have they come across 3 new words? Do they know what they mean and can they use them in a sentence? And again, trying to really expand their vocabulary. The whole idea of what will happen next. And again, getting them to use prediction mode and really, again, engage those higher order thinking skills. Why do they think this will happen next? What evidence they got to think that that would be a logical step for the story to go? And then across culturally, does this story remind you of anything from your own life? How is it similar or different? And again, these can be really key questions on a class or group or even individual student level. So no, thank you so much, everyone who contributed to that. I think just as a couple of takeaways, I was just trying to think on a whole class level what we can do. And again, I'm reiterating a bit what Alistair was saying about the love of reading culture. But I came across a nice one, I Pick. And this is, again, a student agency, student choice, where they go, I choose the book that I want to read. Why do I want to read it? Does the book interest me? Can I understand it? And finally, do I know most of the words? And again, they have a bit of autonomy over what their reading choices are. And then you may be aware that the audio is a key feature to much of Pickatale, and you can use the audio while reading the book, perhaps at a level beyond what you're currently working at, but then that reduces the word decoding pressure. In other words, being able to break down the word into its composite parts, but also starts building the comprehension side. And then absolutely make reading social, encourage collaborative activities, role playing, acting out scenes, again, linking into art, etc. Positive reinforcement, and I'm sure everyone does this on this call. Avoid associating it with a punishment activity. Make sure it's something that they really frame it as an enjoyable escape. And then set aside time perhaps for independent reading without having the quizzes, without having the assignments, but in other words, just to motivate participation. So thank you. I've just had a pop in from Jacqueline. Integrating art after reading or listening to a story also helps develop comprehension amongst reluctant readers. Absolutely, Jacqueline, that's great. And then sharing their ideas, yeah, a bit shy regarding that. And then putting them onto paper can really, really bridge that gap. So no, thank you so much for those particular suggestions. So just to cap, we have covered today, obviously looking at where the state of play regarding literacy statistics, what we need to do to nurture reluctant into confident readers, some potential intervention strategies, creating this love of reading culture. We use Create, which is AI in terms of harnessing the particular interest areas for reading, and then touched on engaging these struggling readers at the end. So thank you for everyone's input. So without further ado, we will be reconvening in approximately a month's time. We're going to be looking at unlocking critical thinking, so implementing effective reading interventions. Now, we will share the link. Please sign up for it. It will be at the same time, and this really corresponds well to Asian afternoon time, which is brilliant. And ultimately, thank you so much for taking the time to come in and join us on this webinar. We've really, really appreciated your input and look forward to seeing you again. Any questions or anything that you'd like to contact us at, it's a nice simple email address, schools@pickatale.com. So thank you, everyone. And thank you, Alistair.
Thank you, Ramsay. I hope you've really enjoyed today's session. And of course, if you do have any questions and you'd just like to hang around for a couple of minutes, we'll stay on the call as well. If you've got any questions that you'd like to have here.
Thanks for everyone's kind messages. Let's have a look here. So Cristobal, learners in public school, yeah, are reluctant readers because they don't have the urge to read English language. That is indeed a challenge. So that means, again, enhancing the vocabulary and meaning in their native language and then translating that into English. So yeah, that can be really difficult in terms of speaking and communication. And perhaps the audio is a great gateway into that to get them familiarized with the tonal sounds of the English language. So no, thank you, Cristobal.
It's a great question there from Elmer. Is this useful for an English as a foreign language class, middle and high school? We do see a lot of students, not just in primary, but across secondary school, using this as an English language tool. Yes. And in fact, it can be quite an immersive way of getting children to read authentically across a range of texts. To support, especially using Create, to support across the process of learning different subjects as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Christabel, and to you.
Wonderful. Well, as I say, thank you so much for taking the time out of your afternoon. And we really look forward to seeing you next time. If you have any burning questions, please place them in chat now, or do reach out after this session at schools@pickatale.com.
Now,
Elmer asks, is there a free trial for this? I think you'll be best placed to answer that, Alistair.
Thank you. Yes. If you are in the Philippines, I would encourage you to reach out to your account executive. If you're in Japan, I would encourage you to get in touch with us at schools@pickatale.com, or pop over to the website for Pickatale at pickatale.com, and you'll be able to just fill in that contact us form, and we'll make sure that you do get access to a free trial. By all means, it would be our absolute pleasure, Elmer.
And I'll put a link in now.
But certainly, just to reiterate that, if you are in the Philippines, it would be worthwhile to contact your account executive at C&E, who I believe probably contacted you about this session, and they'd be very happy to get you set up with a trial today.
And Elmer, I've just placed a little link into the chat window that takes you straight to your start a free trial today form. But yeah, we'd love to have you on board in Japan. But thank you, everyone. Feel free to
I've just noticed also that there's a question that Elmer has had about sustainable development goals. Do we have related topics and materials for sustainable development goals?
We have dedicated books on each one of the sustainable development goals, and they can be accessed within the library. Again, I'll put a link through into the chat now, but you can search for SDG or sustainable, and they will then pick up. And they're in the climate and environment category. But I will just bring them up here. And if I just share my screen again, and forgive me, I can't remember who it was who asked that. And hopefully you're seeing over here. So what we've got then is just a book for each one of the goals set at a stage 5. And that's again appropriate for that particular subject area. So no, great question there. Thank you. Lovely. Great stuff, Elmer.
Wonderful. So I think we'll wrap that up for now, and just wanted to say thank you again to everybody for joining us. It's been great to have us with you for the first one, and we look forward to seeing some of you, if you can join us for the next one in a few weeks' time. Thank you, Ramsay. Great to have you lead on this session, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon. All the best. God bless.
Thanks, Alistair. And thanks, everyone. Humbled by the amount of people. Really appreciate it. See you later.